Hello and welcome to Breaking the Cycle to Step Forward podcast, episode 26. I'm Beverley Ann.
And I'm Chris Tuck, and we're also joined in the room with Ruby. So please ignore any other noises that you might hear.
And today's subject is about intimacy and sex. So we wanted to go through this and discuss quite a challenging conversation for some people, but it's also to raise awareness and also alleviate some of the guilt that survivors often and victims often feel. So, Chris, I'm prepared to start this one.
Yeah, please do, because I find this quite a challenging subject, but I'm willing to take part because it's important.
Yes, and it's challenging for both of us in different ways. So whilst we want to share from lived experience, which we will, we're also mindful that we have partners, etc. So anyone listening to this, please don't think that it's going to get too in depth, but it will be educational as well.
Yeah.
So I'm going to start off with when I was 14, 15, I was in a children's home and I came home one day with a love bite on my neck. I was really proud. I was actually in a children's home. That signifies that somebody loves me.
I think also when we were teenagers, having what did we used to call them? Hookies.
Oh no, I called him, hickey.
A hickey, a love bite on your neck was a sign of, oh, someone loves me.
Yeah, gave me street cred.
Yeah.
So I didn't hide it. I flounced in. And there it was. And Auntie Helen, who was the matron of the children's home, she took me aside and sat me down and said, do you understand the difference between making love and sex?
Did you?
No, but I was quite horrified that she was talking to me about something that was quite uncomfortable. But on the other hand, settled down because she was speaking to me not in a condescending way. She was asking me a question. So I said, no, please explain. And she said, well, sex is an act between two adults, and making love is when it's more intimate and it's between two adults that are in love and have built a relationship.
Okay.
And then she went on to explain that love bites are often given by adults to each other in the height of passion, of which I was horrified. And I said, I got this at the bus stop because I didn't want her to think that I was. But what was most important was what she'd said. It was the act between two adults.
Consenting.
Absolutely. Two consenting adults. And for this conversation, that means anybody over the age of 18. That also means that anybody over the age of 18 who is consenting because they have the wherewithal as well. So that's whether it due to be to they have the mental capacity or they are sober.
Yeah.
And we need to make that clear. There's no blurring of the lines there. But this is when we come to intimacy, because there's a misunderstanding sometimes about sexual abuse and sexual violence.
Okay.
And for me, first of all, intimacy is when you're building an intimate relationship with someone that isn't necessarily involving full, and I will say penetrative sex, but consensually you're allowing them to come into your boundary on your body.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, when it happens as a child, when an adult is being over intimate, that is not sexual, that is sexual abuse.
And it's not consensual.
Not consensual, that's the word I meant to use. Yeah. So this is where we're starting to get there. And I'm saying this carefully and slowly because I know that this is a very challenging conversation and it's something that we do need to get out there and raise awareness of.
And I also think, Beverley, that we know that it should be consenting adults. However, we know that when children go through puberty, then we all become more sexually aware. We may be investigating our own bodies. We may be having those teenage relationships. Some people I know have had sex well before they were 16. Again, I'm not here to judge or condone or whatever, but it remains important that as long as it's the same sort of age and it's still consensual, there's no misuse of power, no misuse of control, no misuse of anything. So that person, both of those people are coming together because they both want to.
And that's important.
That is often looked at as the grey area because you're underage, but it's almost looked upon as acceptable. So if I, for example, was 15 and I went to my mum and dad, this is just a scenario, went to my mum and dad and said, oh, I'm having intimate relationships with my 15-year-old boyfriend, and they took umbrage at that, and then they wanted to report that to the police would often look at that as what it is. It's not a misuse of power and control by any one of the parties. It's two teenagers consenting together
within that boundary.
So even though it's not legal, it's not what's classed as inappropriate unless there is a misuse of power and control.
Yes, because there is another part of this as well, and we're not going to go into it too much, but we can't run from it. And that is sibling abuse. Abuse by other children to some children.
So peer-to-peer abuse, which is
abuse
on the increase, guys.
Absolutely. And that does happen. So there's sexualizing acts being done through bullying.
As well.
You know, that is abuse.
Bullying
is abuse. So we just want to lay that background for everyone. And to, you know, get some more clarity here in a podcast that we're looking to raise awareness and not trigger people.
But we just wanted to sort of like share really that we can't ignore this normal growing up and this normal consensual behavior between peers, because there are lots of people that do that. I did it when I was a teenager. And that's why I often get confused with some of my emotions and my feelings, because there was the consensual bit in me that wanted to be loved and love in a sexual way because it was consenting. But then there was also these ghosts from my past where there was these adults that had power and control over me and sexually abused me. And that's where a lot of my feelings around shame and guilt came into my actual consensual sexual relationships. And made me feel yuck, ick. There's no other way of explaining it.
And I, even at a young age, didn't want to be in the place that I was with my dad. But when his friend abused me, that wasn't so bad. And then that made me feel guilty because it wasn't my dad. So it seemed more normal. Does that make sense?
It does now. You've just explained it like that.
But that's where the guilt came from then. I was only 8 when it started. But did that mean I caused it? I wanted it. And I didn't. I was a child. But can you see where the feelings come from? And I'm not going to go into too much detail because I'm very aware for my own self-care as well. But that's when I realised, when Auntie Helen had sat down with me, then suddenly a switch was turned on. I realised what had been going on, and for years. And that's when the judgment came in. You know, there was shock, disbelief, but also what was ironic was that was of an age when we were starting, you know, as I said, I got that love bite, and yet I hadn't connected the two things.
No.
One was a normal
growing up,
and then the other thing was so heinous, that's the only other word to say. My way of responding to it was to disassociate. That's how I survived.
What, pretend it didn't happen?
Yeah, and even during the act, I wasn't feeling, I was there, I was not feeling, I was shutting off.
Yeah.
And that's where, when you come through abuse, for some people, whatever your coping mechanism is, you can continue that.
What do you mean?
So, for instance, I would shut off automatically as I was living through my adult life, shall I say, establishing my relationship.
Okay.
Yeah, I now see that what I thought was a loving situation, yes, I was, I became a mum, but I can also see how, there were some intimacy things that I was unable to participate. Now, intimacy to me is even when you're just hugging.
Yeah.
Because if you're hugging someone and you want to, that is intimate. When someone puts their arm around you and you don't want them to, wow, you feel how that
complete different feeling.
Different. Also kissing.
Yeah.
At one time that was something I really struggled with.
Yeah.
Really struggled with. And then it's only through coming through recovery that I was able to understand. And this isn't the place, and I'm not going to go into it, but what I'm going to say, as a woman, there were things that was very, very difficult. And so if you're a woman who's experiencing, and I will say woman here because we're talking about the vaginal parts here, pain, cramps, during
tightness, like uncomfortable tightness,
during making love, you know what, you are so normal. But we don't know that.
No, you're right.
We don't know that.
Yeah.
The number of times I had cystitis afterwards and discomfort, that is normal. So we just want to share that.
And for me, as I said, I found this a really hard topic to discuss, and I've been working on it with my counsellor in the last couple of months, and I felt ready to have this conversation with you today, because we have talked about doing it before, but we've put it off, haven't we? Is the fact that I literally took part in sex in the end just to get pregnant to have my children. In the beginning of my relationship, it was really loving and consensual, and we did everything, that normal couples would do. And I did enjoy it at the time, but afterwards I would feel dirty, disgusting. I would feel like just not nice about myself. I felt shame and guilt and all the rest of it. And even mentioning the word sex would bring me out into, like I'm doing it now, would make me feel really uncomfortable. And it was only after speaking to the counsellor and that it's just like, no, that's normal. What's tainted the normality is the feelings that you've got from those adults in your life that took advantage of you being a child, took advantage of you being vulnerable, took advantage of the situation, and took from you what you didn't and wasn't able to consent to. So it's the power and the control play. And some of my abuse, I'm not going to speak about, but one part was literally one perpetrator just touching my breast. And when some professionals fed back to me where it was touch over clothing, I went ballistic, because that touch over clothing was more impactful to me than some of the touching that had gone on. Because this particular person had complete power and control over my mum, had done heinous things, I'm going to nick your word, to other people. And the fact that he did it to me in front of my loved one, my boyfriend, he was sending out a clear message. And that, I was 15, I felt so violated. That act meant more to me than any of the other stuff that I'd gone through, which doesn't make sense, but it did to me. So when these professionals went, oh, well, you know, it was just touch over clothing, I went, you haven't got an effing clue.
And this is where it's the intimacy, it's overstepping the boundaries. It's not consensual. And that's something that I very much understand. I will say, and this is something I've said many a time, I actually understand how sex workers can operate.
Yes.
Because that's sex without intimacy.
Yeah.
And it's a choice. And nobody leaves school and says, I want to be a sex worker, but that's their choice. And I really, really, you know, have no judgment there. But when you have somebody, a grown up, and you're a child, and they're being intimate with you, even over, I mean, I don't like it when adults continue to tickle children when the children are saying stop.
Yeah.
That to me, stop right now. So what we find as adults, as we're getting older, is a part of being intimate, making love, is foreplay.
Mm-hmm.
But that's the bit that's really challenging, because you're allowing yourself to relax, you're allowing yourself to let go, but that's the bit that I used to find extremely triggering. And now, in my late 50s, done a lot of work, and yes, it's something that, you know, I have a lovely relationship, lovely intimate sexual relationship, and I'm proud of that. However, it is something that we've had to be very clear with boundaries.
Yeah.
And even today at 58, after all those many years ago, I have to be very aware of timings, you know, different times of the year. If I'm in a kitchen and I'm focusing on something, don't come in and try and
cuddle
me, because that will trigger me.
Yeah.
Because that's not the right time.
Yeah.
Because somebody's overstepped that boundary when I was a child.
Yeah, yeah. What I also wanted to bring up in this conversation was the fact that some victim survivors have said that when they were being abused, their body responded in a way that made them feel like their body was letting them down. So, sorry, the body will automatically respond to stimulation. That's just what it does. We're all bred that way.
And that's why
it's a natural response.
There's a lot of people that think that boys can't be abused. Well, actually, that's not true, because they will respond naturally.
Yeah, and same with girls, you know, boys and girls, children, they will respond in a sexual way because that's what the body is there to do. Yeah, sex in a consenting relationship should be joyful. It's normal, it's natural,
and it's beautiful when it's right.
When it's right, okay. But when victim survivors have spoken to us, they've shared that because their body responded, they then felt responsible. They felt that they were contributing to the abuse of themselves, which is not true. Yeah, it's not true. Your bodily response is a natural, normal response. So if you feel that that is you, please do not blame yourself. You didn't want this. Yeah. People, the perpetrators, took advantage of you. They had power and control over you. Your bodily response was normal and natural. And we just need to keep pointing that out.
And I don't mind sharing, when I was going through counselling at one time, that one of the things I struggled with was out of both of my parents, my abuser was my dad, and yet he was the most loving out of both parents.
Right.
So I also, my dad, we had no food, but
neglect.
There was extreme neglect. But my mum and dad every day had eggs on toast. Even we didn't as children, but I had to cook them for my parents. But my dad would sometimes say 1 egg only today, and I'd make 2 because I would know that he would share it out.
Right.
He'd share it out to me, my sister, my brother, etc. And we'd take turns in it. And so where it confused me was, and I remember saying it to my counsellor, to the outside world, my dad looked like he was the most loving parent out of both of them. And even for years, I would say it was my dad that was the loving parent. But actually, there was a cost to that as well. And there was a cost to make sure that he still got his eggs every day, so that myself, my brothers and sisters could get some food in the morning. And I said, I just accepted it. And for years, I felt guilty because I felt I was complicit.
Yeah.
And it was only then when we did the work, looking at another child. So I'm sharing that because it is challenging. It's challenging to listen to. And we're not going to lie.
No.
This podcast is
Not
challenging.
easy. To be so open and frank about our own stuff is hard.
Yeah. If we were in a group of survivors only, that's different for me personally. I wouldn't have, but this is generic. So for those of you who are not survivors, again, I am going to say thank you for listening.
Yeah.
Because this takes an inordinate amount of courage to listen to this, to be aware, to raise awareness, and also to be aware for other children of today. For those of you who are listening who are victims and survivors, well, what can I say? You are amazing in your courage to be even listening to this today.
But we also just want to draw attention to the fact that if you are having issues in your relationship, your sexual relationship, this could be why. Some of you might not even actually understand or acknowledge that your past could be impacting you in this area in this way.
Yeah.
So and there's that.
Yeah. And how do you go forward?
Yeah. How do you get the help you need?
Yeah. Well, for me, I won't lie, after my first marriage, I did actually go to somewhere thinking there was something wrong with me. I thought,
yep. Yeah, that's normal.
But I had a lovely nurse and I had a checkup and I had a lovely, lovely nurse. And once she asked me questions, I was able to give the answers. And she said, no, actually, I think you need to read a few books, first of all, do some more exploration. Yeah. But also it taught me, with more counselling, to be honest about my boundaries. So I went the other way for a while. But like with my husband now, I don't want him to know absolutely everything. No. I don't want him to see me. I don't want to see that image. However, there are times I do need to be able to say things, because if I'm saying no in a way or jumping because he goes to put his arms around me, I don't want him to think he's done something wrong.
Yeah.
And that obviously comes up. That's all part of our communication.
Yeah.
But what's beautiful, and I will say beautiful, is the fact that there are times when I've been able to be the woman I want to be within a normal adult consenting relationship. And it's amazing.
And I think to add to that, I was watching Emma Kenny on YouTube the other day, and one of her cases was looking at, unfortunately, this lovely lady being murdered by her then boyfriend, where it was described as sex had gone wrong. They both, in a consensual relationship, liked rough sex, okay, but it was consenting apparently. And Emma was explaining that if that is your boundary as a couple and you keep within that and you stick to that and it's both consenting, that's absolutely fine. What you get up to is your business. But when it's not consensual, then you need to be able to speak up. And if you can't, that's not the right relationship for you. And if you feel you're being abused, if you feel like as an adult, if you feel like you're being abused, used, sexually violated against, leave the relationship with help. Go to the police and report it if it's rape or anything else that is going on. But also putting boundaries in place, whatever relationship you're in, once you're old enough, consenting. And if you're underage, then anything that goes on between an adult and an underage minor, whether it be a child, adolescent, is a crime. It's that simple. Again, as we said, there is what we call this sort of like grey area where it will be consenting teenage making out. But then we have to be mindful about peer on peer and sibling sexual abuse. That is not consenting. So there's lots to this, and we have to make it really clear, where does it sit? And it is a case by case basis.
But it comes back to when we talked about boundaries in our podcast before. So go back to the boundary podcast, because this is about boundaries. What is right for you?
As an adult.
If it's not right for you, it's not right. And I've finished relationships before because I was unable to say I didn't want to. But I was put in that different chat, and so bye. Gone. They didn't do anything. They didn't do anything, but it wasn't rape.
It was just going in a different direction to what
and
you
I was like, no,
with.
End of.
But I just want to say, some victim and survivors, they think, and they've said, that sex to them is love. But once they've experienced love, that they then know that those previous relationships were just sex, but they were confusing it because of the abuse they'd gone through. Some survivors, victim survivors, are celibate. Some use sex as a way of getting through life, But again, there's no judgment, but if it's unhealthy for you, if it's impactful to you, that's when you need to go and get help. If you're okay with whatever it is that's going on in your life, and I mean truly okay, then you carry on.
This is not a lecture. This is to open the conversation, to say, what is consensual and what isn't.
And I think some of the things that Emma Kenny was sharing from her point of view in this case that she was looking at is that if someone is consumed by alcohol, they're not consenting. So even if you think they are, they're not.
They're not.
All right. So, and we was also saying, like, we've both got boys, haven't we, as well, that boys nowadays have to be, girls, all people have to take care of themselves, but boys have to be so careful to make sure that any potential girl that they are going to get with is of age and is consenting. And even if it's a homosexual relationship or even a one-off, it has to be, are you of age? Are you both consenting? Because it can turn like that for any one of you. So just be aware, and just make sure you're both on the same song sheet, so to speak, before you get into that relationship, before you get intimate. Speak about boundaries, speak about what you both like, don't like, as the relationship builds.
And I'm gonna end on a lighter note.
Go on then.
Right. So when I first met my current husband, I say current because we've only got married this year, so I'm still getting used to saying that. On our third date, we went out and we were walking along the beach of a night time, and he said, I need to just have a conversation with you, because we were coming nearer to the moment, and it was dark, and he was saying about different boundaries in a sexual relationship, and I was mortified. I was like, oh my God, I can't believe you're saying this. But on the other hand, that's when I truly fell in love with him.
Because he was taking into account how you're feeling.
And we was outside, we were walking hands, holding hands. It was dark, so he couldn't see my face going red. But he also he asked me, what was in a place where, I felt completely comfortable. My toes were curling. But that made such a difference. It made such a difference. So I just want I just want to share that with people, because it doesn't matter how things have been. If you're in a relationship and you want to stay with someone, but you're not happy with something sexually, it's okay to say.
Yeah.
Because I also remember being in a relationship and saying to the counsellor, I can't tell them I don't want to.
Right.
It wasn't that they were doing anything wrong.
Yeah.
I didn't feel that I could. And I look
Yeah.
back, I was fighting to lose a relationship. Can you believe that?
No, it's normal.
I know.
That happens so often.
I
know so many women of our age, in our 50s, that don't particularly want to be sexually active anymore, but they do it to keep the other person happy. And also just to keep everything calm and, okay. No.
I know, but we learn. So that's why we're sharing, why we do this podcast.
Yeah.
We're honest, we're authentic, raw, uncut, authentic, from a lived experience and professional perspective. So you've got it there.
Yeah.
So,
but I think we need to make sure that everybody knows there is a difference between consenting sex and sexual abuse, sexual violence.
yes.
And one thing I also wanted to just bring up, I had a victim survivor share with me many years ago that their abuser was a grandfather, and the grandfather, she loved the grandfather. He loved her. There was genuine love there, but he also did abuse her. So she couldn't get it out of her head that it was all okay. And that's okay as well. You can feel that way. Is it right? Go to your counsellor, speak to your counsellor about that. We're not here to pass judgment one way or another. What wasn't right is the abuse that happened.
And he is the one
in the wrong.
The
exactly.
Boundary.
Yeah.
Full stop.
And I've heard that story quite a lot, where actually the victim survivor loves the person that abused them, and they find it really hard to unpick the love that they have and the abuse that occurred.
And that's what I was saying earlier. If you looked at my parents, you'd think my dad was the most loving one. And that's the one we got the love from.
Right. Yeah. So very complex area, and all impacted differently, and all need to unpick it with a professional if it's impacting you and if it's impacting your relationships. It's important, I think, that you know that you can go and do that work when you're ready.
Right, well, that's goodbye from us.
Yeah, definitely.
Anything you want to say last thing, Chris?
Not to be afraid about speaking about this area, because if you don't, it can ruin many a relationship. Many a good relationship.
But most importantly, and I'm going to have the final word here, most importantly, the relationship that's most important is a relationship with self. Okay, so if it doesn't feel right, it's not right
for you.
Okay, for you.
Yeah. All right then, so it's bye from me.
And it's bye from me.
All right guys, see you soon. Bye for now.